Hello, this is the road to MSI, and we're vision denial. I did that backwards this time. No matter, my name is Sam, and for those unfamiliar, the road to MSI 2022 is where I watch every playoff from every region, yes, including that one. Well, I've already watched this, so what is this? Well, this is the Meet the Teams, and this time we get to our 11th team to have qualified for the MSI 2022 asterisks because their region had qualified a team before Evil Geniuses, but Southeast Asian game stuff and all that. We've got the Saigon Buffaloes. And just as a note, this is technically the second seed from the VCS, as the Gigabyte Marines, a much more dominant team, opted in to choose to go to the Southeast Asian Games as they qualified for both and had the chance to choose for one over the other. And with it, the Saigon Buffaloes, who got second place for both of those particular qualifying events, were going to be now representing the VCS. And being the only team to consistently beat the Gigabyte Marines, let's take a look at who they are and what they're all about. Starting with the coaching staff, meet Ren. Ren has been part of the VCS, or the Southeast Asian League, for some time, jumping between top and mid lane since 2015, but finally joining the Buffaloes in 2018 as their coach, and has done, pretty frankly, very well for this organization. Ren here has shown an ability to create different kinds of compositions that allow a lot of space, re-engage, and a lot of creativity from them in teamfight scenarios that usually would leave a lot of other teams very uncomfortable to approach. The only thing, however, is that they tend to remove fairly standard, well-trodden paths. So they may be a very wild and fast and loose type of organization and team, but they don't tend to play standard as consistently as others may hope. So what does this look like in terms of their stats and their playstyle? Well, it's fairly aggressive, fast-paced, and generally pretty bloody. This is a very team fight heavy team, and like a lot of the other team fighting teams, their objective focus is not always there. That said, they are consistently the first to turrets, the first to heralds, the first to dragons, more towards the heralds than anything else, as they like to focus on getting those turrets as fast as possible. Much of their drafting strategies revolve around teamfight strategies that are awkward and require early leads and tempo that honestly are pretty fun to watch on occasions, if not a little bit overzealous. And you can see in their win rate that their success, that the type of team fighting and the type of drafting that they choose to go for is really coin flippy on a matter of just in a case-by-case scenario. So where they're fairly consistent in being able to get the first blood, first turret, first herald, so on and so forth, they don't always translate that in the best way possible. Very high win rate when ahead, but not consistently always ahead. Meet Hasmed. Hasmed over here has been in the Vietnamese region since approximately 2018 and has stuck with the Buffaloes since May of 2019 consistently with this particular roster. And he is the primary carry. Maybe a little inconsistent, but given his laning stats and staying ahead, his team fighting doesn't always show it. And given the fact that he is very much a primary carry and tries to find a lot of the kills and a lot of the abilities to flank and bring up a lot of leads, his kill participation isn't always reflected. And that's totally fine in my opinion. Given the roster of champions that he picks is frequently a 1-4 or a 1-3-1 setup, he is creating a lot of pressure in the top lane in ways that allow the rest of the Buffaloes to create or to gain opportunities in setting up their neutral objectives and other team fights that they can take skirmish and advantage of. Hasmed has been fairly interesting for me to see as a player, as he will over aggressively push and try to create a lot of pressure and vacuum that forces his opponents to come in, but gets caught frequently. And so a lot of his stats look fairly okay until you realize that they come at the cost oftentimes to very good and consistent setup. And the key issue here with this team is consistency, which is not going to stop here. Next, let's meet BeanJ, the jungler. And BeanJ has just been with the Buffaloes as an organization for some time, but only coming in as part of their main jungle roster in the 2021 season. BeanJ is one of the least flexible junglers that we have. Even though his roster of champions looks fairly familiar to a lot of people, notice the 10 Lee Sin games and 10 Viego games compared to everything else. And at that, not even that fairly consistently great. Where his lack of flexibility comes from, however, is a good consistency for the early game and creating pressure for his laners. Large amount of first blood participation, 45%, which is very high amongst a lot of different laners, whilst still staying even, if not maybe slightly ahead by the time the 15-minute arrives. And so, in a region where a lot of junglers are really pushing it at any given level, he will bring it and stay consistent with his jungle routing. My issue comes, however, is that he does not tend to balloon any of these leads fairly frequently, given the types of champions that he usually plays require a lot of snowballing and a lot of success and gold. And without that particular success or gold coming through, his high consistency in the early game does not translate to the rest of the game usually. Next, we meet Froggy, who, for those who are fans of the Vietnamese scene, may know him from being part of the region since 2019 in terms of the professional play, but has been with the Buffaloes since the 2020 era. And quite honestly, Froggy is one of the more underwhelming players out of the whole roster of the Buffaloes. His kill participation is low, even by mid laner standpoints. Looking closer to top laners, fairly isolated overall, and frequently plays different champions on a wide spectrum of different kinds of compositions, but not at a good or consistent rate. Froggy has been showing to be one of the weaker mid laners amongst the groups that he's going to be facing off of, but he does, however, bring in a lot of presence towards team fights. Where he lacks the ability to bring in a lot of pressure during his early laning phase, he does bring during team fights. My issue with this is that, again, during the international stage, with a lot of teams that really benefit from early game play, the fact that he does not bring a lot of pressure for it going in is not solid for us to expect that he'll be able to transition to the mid to late game without some difficulty. Meet Shogun. Shogun over here has been technically speaking, has been a rookie. He was a substitute player for the 2021 season for a brief period of time, but has actually finally joined the main roster, no longer as a substitute, but just as the starting lineup. And so, with this, he has a similar presence as Danny, with the same kind of mindset. Very inflexible, with a lot of Jinx and Aphelios games, as you can see over here in the champions that he's played. And where his stats are decent, a lot of it has to do with the way that BeanJ really puts a lot of attention towards that side of the lane. Without it, he would not have the same kind of would not have the same kind of abilities, and frankly, even struggles against a lot of his counterparts in the VCS. And it kind of concerns me regarding the situation where how do I put it? They put so much attention towards Shogun only for it to not lead to much more later into the game. By all accounts and purposes, Shogun is not a very strong team fighter. He is what a lot of people would call a clean up marksman or clean up ADC. And so he's there to service the damage when needed, and by all accounts, that's totally fine. But given the kinds of situations, the kind of playstyles that they really aim for, it does not always service the team in the best way possible. Finally, let's meet Taki. Taki has been with the Buffalo since the 2021 season and has a huge, the most flexible set of champions to play with. Now, for those who may not know, the Vietnamese scene has a large roster usually for their teams. And Taki is of no difference being able to swap lanes. And so when I mention that this is a very wild and erratic team, this is kind of what I mean. You've got a bunch of players who are willing to swap lanes and create a large amount of different variety in terms of their draft. And honestly, I'm all up for it. That said, where his wild flexibility comes in, we really need to look at what's more consistent in terms of their trends. And that's a lot of Nautilus. A lot of it. A lot of Leona. And that's because Taki still is, by heart, a let's go team fight type of support. He does roam. He does do with his regular things in terms of being able to provide pressure into the mid lane and everything else. But you'll find him more often than not babysitting Shogun to make sure that Shogun gets the leads that he needs and they're able to transition to the mid game for the team fights that they usually excel in. And I think that he's very limited into his approach of what he can do from there on. And so I would love to see a lot of this wacky and zaniness that comes from this particular type of player, as he does show some interesting approaches towards the kinds of flanks that he wants to create. But a lot of flexibility in terms of picks needs to be backed up with consistency, and we don't see that still. So what do I think? Well, as a fan of the Vietnamese region and the VCS, I really would have preferred the Gigabyte Marines to be the representatives as the first time that the VCS gets to send a representative in the last 2 years. That's 4 international events the VCS has not been able to participate, and they're going to be sending in a fairly inconsistent, sometimes lackluster team that have moments of brilliance and moments of excitement. But I rather that consistency. The Gigabyte Marines were so much more dominant, and the Buffaloes are lucky that the kinds of who they ended up with in terms of like the group being in Group A has a fairly lenient set of laners. But the unfortunate matter is that 2 of the teams there are rather dominant in the early game, and one of them is fairly consistent in team fighting, and they won't be able to lean into that aspect, especially if they're not consistent at ballooning the leads that they get. And so I would not expect the Vietnamese region to come back in full force in the MSI, especially with this team being their representatives. Now, not to worry, I do expect at least some improvement. The VCS doesn't usually lie down in international events, but I also am not going to be super confident about their prospects of leaving the Rumble stage, or if they do, of doing incredibly well in the group stage either. But those are my thoughts. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you like this type of content, like and subscribe, share, I'll do the rest. This is the last Meet the Teams. If you haven't seen any of the other Meet the Teams, the playlist is in the Road to MSI in the channel. Feel free to watch those. And hopefully we'll be able to see each other when MSI starts again. And with that, I should see you guys on the 10th when it all starts. And don't forget, do as I do. Take lots of notes, pay attention, and honestly, remember that vision denial is the best. I'll see you next time.